Hey, ladies and gentlemen, this is Geoffrey Woo with the Health Via Modern Nutrition HVMN podcast. And I'm excited to welcome back my friend Siim Land back on the program. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good and glad to be back.
Yeah, we had a good conversation, maybe a year and a half ago. And I know we just recently taped the conversation on your program over on YouTube as well. So good to share the communities and share the knowledge here. So for folks who might not have tuned in or aren't following on social, you're a prolific personal experimenter, biohacker, author. What's the best way to describe yourself as you're tinkering through human performance, metabolism, all of that good stuff?
Yeah, I think I would consider myself like an author first and foremost, and doing like just experiments with myself and sharing my information with others as well.
Yeah, 100%. So maybe just on top of mind, since I know that you've been looking a lot at resilience, immune function, and obviously top of mind is COVID-19, anything particularly special that you've been implementing personally? I know that different geographies, different countries have very different strategies in terms of how they manage a population. I know that the United Kingdom just went back into lockdown. America is kind of on track to reopening. Obviously, Sweden never locked down. How are you doing? I know you're in Scandinavia, so like kind of curious to hear your thoughts, your opinions on the geographical front as well as the personal front.
Yeah, well, here in Estonia, everything is pretty normal. Like we did lockdown during the first wave, but during the summer we kind of reopened, and there are some small rise in cases, but most people are still pretty normal, and we don't have like a huge amount of restrictions, so you can still go anywhere you want, and not necessarily there's like no mask mandates either. And I think like people are just they may take themselves more cautiously, or they may be more careful when they go into public spaces, but nothing really serious. Personally, I haven't been affected almost at all. Like I still live in the countryside, and I don't have like different people around me all the time. So yeah, I'm pretty fortunate in that sense, and I wasn't never kind of limited by the lockdowns, aside from maybe like having to cancel some conferences or something like that. But other than that, it's been a pretty normal and actually quite productive.
Yeah, nice. I mean, that's very fortunate, very lucky. So curious, and just to get to better understand Estonian policy. So there is no mask mandate. You can go, are bars open, restaurants open? Is this, and the follow-up question is this common within the kind of the Eastern European, kind of Northern Europe region? Is that just kind of what it looks like around that region of our planet right now?
Currently, the bars and big kind of malls are open. You can't really have like mass conferences or mass gatherings, but like other like public spaces are pretty open. Gyms are open as well. Like in Estonia, like a lot of people, like we were like ex-Soviet Union country, and a lot of people are still alive who were in the Soviet Union, and I think that they have this preconceived notion about being not really trustworthy of politicians, and not really not trusting like the government and that sort of thing. So I think that's why we like the average person might have kept a cool head, or trying to be very skeptical about this entire thing, and they certainly like value their freedoms as well. They don't necessarily react very positively to people trying to restrict their freedoms, and they're very, very kind of skeptical.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't even think it's limited to post-Soviet bloc countries. I mean, even in America, right? Like I would say the freedom of our country is that there's a lot of expression, and for sure there's a lot of folks who don't trust government in America as well. So, I mean, I think it's like, for better or for worse, I think that the public will in America to do a mass shutdown has gone past. I think it's hard to get that enough of a social commitment, a social contract to recommit to that at this point. We might have been able to like shut down right in the beginning when there's a lot of positive will, a lot of trust, a lot of like community goodwill together. But now I think that just sailed. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I think it's just like looking at it factually, pragmatically, talking to people from all different political spectrums. I think it's just hard to ask the population, the people to say, hey, we've been in this pseudo weird lockdown for going onwards of 9 months, going into a full year. People have livelihoods that they need to worry about. And I think there's a good discussion. Maybe we're lulled into complacency where the death rates are lower, right? But the case rates are higher, at least in America. I'm not sure what's going on in Estonia.
Yeah, I think I agree, and we can't literally we can't hold the lockdowns any longer, and even the WHO said that you shouldn't do the lockdowns because it's going to lead to a lot of poverty and food scarcity in the third world and other poorer countries. So yeah, it's a very we shouldn't try to use it as a first line of defense. We kind of, that train is already passed, and we have to kind of focus on other means of management, the spread of the virus, and making sure that we take into account also the other things that help to deal with the virus on a personal level as well, by just increasing our own resilience and strengthening our immune systems, and making sure that we as individuals are healthy and on point.
Yeah, let's dive into that topic. I mean, let's talk about the individual. Let's talk about the individual resiliency. So if we have to assume that public policy has kind of gone, past its limits in terms of enforcing one or another direction, I think, again, I don't want to be overly pessimistic, but I think pragmatically, it's going to be a lot of the intervention, the defense is going to be bottoms up individual. So I know this is something that you focus a lot on. What has been things that have generally something that you focus on in terms of resilience, and what are things that you've really doubled down on in terms of really ramping up immune function, all of that good stuff?
One of the biggest things that I've noticed that is very important for immune system and just general physical health is your vitamin D status. We all know vitamin D is important as a hormone, but it's also quite essential for the immune system. Just regulates the immune cell functioning, as well as increases the cytotoxicity of your immune cells as well. So you definitely, and there are studies showing that the lower your vitamin D status is, the worse outcomes you get from COVID-19. And vitamin D deficiency is also linked with other immunodeficiencies like autoimmune diseases and increased infection to influenza and other similar cases. So just as a person during the summer, I was just make sure that I got plenty of sunlight and went outside whenever I could. And even now, when it's getting darker, I still try to get as much vitamin D as I can during daytime from the sun, because that's the most bioavailable form of getting it, and also the safest. I do take a vitamin D supplement as well, because I'm there's not a lot of sunlight in Estonia for this time of the year. But generally just I try to get as much sunlight as I could during the summer. Yeah,
that's something that I've been hammering home through our community, our conversations on my podcast and channel. But I think especially in wintertime, especially now, when you already have typical shrinking of daylight, seasonal disorders in terms of mood, and because it's going to get cold in parts of America, parts of the world, people are going to go out even less. So I think that's extra important to think about. If you can get sunlight, I 100% agree with you. Try to get as much natural sunlight as possible. But if it's just not possible, look at supplementation, look at diet. How do you get vitamin D into your system? That seems very, very, very sensible.
And first, you should also get it tested, so to see what your vitamin D levels are actually, because there are tiers of deficiency. So some studies, they find that if your vitamin D is below 30 nanograms, then you're at a very severe risk of severe outcomes, versus if you're between 30 to 50, then you're still in a very harsh outcome, but it's not as severe as the severe deficiency. And the optimal range tends to be around 60 to 70 nanograms per milliliter. So that's what you would try to aim towards. If you're low, then you probably would need to supplement it. But if you're already within that range, then you don't necessarily need to take a massive megadose.
Yeah, I think it's worth caveating that this is associational. This is retrospective data. So this wasn't a randomized controlled trial moving forward prospectively. And I know there's a lot of discussion in the social media discussion sphere around epidemiology, and when is it legit, when is it not legit. I think in terms of just the vitamin D associational data, it's so robust and it's so cheap and free intervention, and there's no downside really.
For sure.
That it's cool. That seems like a very reasonable plan of action, given that literally getting sunlight is free. Vitamin D is very cheap. It's a pretty no-brainer, if you ask me, in terms of potential benefit and potential risk.
Yeah, even if it doesn't, help your infection risk, is still important for all the other things that vitamin D does, like your hormones and just the general immune system functioning as well. So just getting something that simple is very easy to do.
Yeah. So vitamin D, 100% in agreement with. What else we got that you're thinking about, that you're recommending, that you're doubling down on?
And I also, during this time, I've been taking sauna on a very regular basis. And the sauna is very known to have cardiovascular health benefits, but it also has slight these immuno-strengthening benefits by increasing white blood cell count and increasing nitric oxide that has antiviral effects. And some of the high heat, what I think can be do is to inhibit some viral replication as well. Some through heat shock proteins. So heat shock proteins are these stress molecules that get released during heat stress, and they have been shown to kind of inhibit in some other animal models to inhibit the replication of influenza virus. Even if you pre-treat mice with heat before infecting them with influenza, then they have a much lower death rate. So it's another very simple way of boosting your immune system functioning and just increasing overall resilience. The heat resilience is good for your immune system, but it's also again beneficial for all the other things as well, like cardiovascular fitness and reduced cardiovascular disease risk. And it's another simple thing to implement.
Yeah, that's the only thing I miss. I think I'm very fortunate. I feel like I'm very productive and can kind of do my thing, but I don't have an access to a personal sauna. I wish I did. And the gym that I that has a sauna has that section shut down. So that is definitely one thing that I would be doing if I had access to a sauna. So what does your routine protocol look like? I know that it's something that's pretty common. I see you talk about sauna a lot. So are you doing, what is the exact protocol you're following? What degrees, how long, multiple times? Are you doing hot and cold, mixing that and alternating? What is your sauna protocol?
Yeah, well, I'm quite fortunate again that I have the traditional sauna as well as the infrared sauna. So I try to do it almost maybe 5 to 6 times a week. So I kind of alternate between the traditional sauna and the infrared sauna. So on one day, I'll have the traditional sauna for maybe 20 to 30 minutes. And the temperature is approximately on the traditional sauna, it goes quite high. It's maybe 200 to 220 Fahrenheit, something like that.
Yeah, it's very, very high. I mean, it's boiling. I mean, I've had some friends who do post water boiling, but they're a hardcore mega athlete, super soldier type people. Man, so you're doing 200 to 220 for 30 minutes? Something
like that. I may do 2 sessions of 15 minutes or something as well, where I'll have a cold plunge in between the sessions. I might do it both ways. And generally, it's once you get kind of used to it, then it doesn't feel that's super hot. Your skin isn't gonna burn, and it's not gonna cause any damage to it. Most of the response is associated with just the heat shock or the heat response that generally elicits this higher heat shock protein response as well from the traditional sauna. Whereas with the infrared sauna, you don't necessarily have to reach that high temperatures because the infrared wavelengths have this additional unique benefit that you don't get from the traditional sauna. And with the infrared, you can stay between maybe 150 or 160 even to get the same benefits or some health benefits from that.
Yeah, I'd love to actually tease into this a little bit more. I've been skeptical on the infrared sauna. The data is less robust to me, but I may just be less familiar with the corpus of data there. I think, again, just from having an ancillary interest in sauna and heat shock proteins, it makes a lot of sense why just the classic dry sauna makes sense. There's obviously resilience needed to withstand high amounts of heat. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts in terms of, one, the broader literature for infrared sauna, right? So infrared wavelength light. And then 2, obviously, it's something that you're adapting. Do you see a subjective difference? How do you couch the level of evidence between kind of real heat dry sauna versus infrared sauna in terms of the literature, and then subjective feel? What is your kind of intuition in terms of the pros and cons of each?
Yeah, well, like mechanistically, the infrared sauna is going to penetrate deeper into the tissue and stimulate collagen synthesis, as well as create this small amount of reactive oxygen species, and like that the body then responds to by increasing its own antioxidant defense systems. And there are some like studies show that the infrared sauna increases endothelial or improves endothelial functioning, which the traditional sauna does as well. But the infrared sauna specifically increases like endothelial nitric oxide, and that can be beneficial for cardiovascular function as well, and antiviral effects.
Is that done in humans? Is it controlled against the normal dry sauna?
I don't think they have controlled that specifically. So I haven't seen a lot of. I agree. Like I haven't seen like very clear or definitive results or conclusions about which one is better or which one has like a higher effect on that, because I think that those studies haven't just been done yet, which would be fascinated to see in the future for sure. But I personally think that both are very beneficial and both have health benefits. With the traditional sauna, you may get like this higher heat shock protein response because of the higher heat, and potentially you may start to sweat more as well as a result of that. Whereas with the infrared sauna, you get like maybe a better skin health benefit with the collagen and with the penetrating deeper into the joints and tendons and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think where I net out is that I like the data behind hot sauna, the dry sauna. I think it's also, I think the anecdotal evidence and stories from like I know elite performers who I trust, and I that like are seeing real recovery benefits from hot sauna. So in conjunction with the literature, as well as like speaking towards very credible athletes, top performers that are really smart and like really fit, it's like that kind of passes the evidence bar for my personal test. I'm just not necessarily convinced on infrared just yet, but I think you're absolutely right. Like, it's not to say that I'm dismissive of it. I would love to see the data, especially looking at non-superiority. Is it equivalent? Is it the same? Is it, maybe there's a potential like a superior in terms of collagen, potentially less benefit for heat shock protein. Those seem to be open questions.
Yeah. I think like more heat definitely will increase like more of the heat shock proteins, and also it releases more growth hormone and also get your heart racing more. So it does mimic maybe like some aspects of exercise, but necessarily like maybe like more heat isn't always better. So you may vary between people as well. So if you're not used to like that high amounts of heat, then maybe the infrared sauna can be good enough for you initially, and as you increase your heat tolerance, then you may benefit more from the traditional sauna because you kind of gotten used to some of the heat that you would get from the infrared sauna.
Yeah, let's nerd out a little bit more on sauna protocols, and I think that might not be a better person to like share some thoughts and tips with than with you here. So when I had access to sauna and had like my full gym routine down, I would always look to end a heavy lifting workout in the hot sauna. And the theory and mechanism there is to further increase exercise adaptation, further cause stress. And then as you have both the exercise adaptation and stress, double down with heat that causes more recovery, more repair processes. And then obviously if the growth hormone testosterone increases from the hot sauna compounds with recovery after that heavy workout, that seemed to be subjectively beneficial for myself, as well as that's a typical protocol that I've heard from elite performers in terms of how they were maintaining really strong body composition. So curious to hear if that's similar to how you think about implementing sauna into a day, right? Like you could do it like by itself. You could do it after a workout. I don't know if people do it before a workout. I don't see why you would do it before a workout. Curious how you think about staging this. Do you think about staging it fasted, unfasted? I think the fasted is probably pretty marginal. But I think it wouldn't hurt to do a fasted heavy workout, then end with a hot sauna, and then eat a lot of food. That might be like the most precise, optimal approach, right? You get all the compounding, stacking of interventions here. Love to hear your thoughts there. And then let's talk about cold right after. But before we get too broad here, let's talk about kind of stacking and protocols and ordering and kind of the technical fine tuning, the super micro optimizations.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can nerd out, and that's like I think maybe the best time to take the sauna would be like after a workout to, like you said, to promote the recovery. And the heat shock proteins will like slow down or decrease the protein degradation. So you will be less catabolic when you are in the sauna. The body releases growth hormone to facilitate that. It also increases autophagy, which will try to, with the heat shock proteins, repair those misfolded proteins and repair the damage. And there are like some rat studies where they basically, crippled some rats in the study, and those rats that were treated with the heat shock recovered faster, and they regrow their muscles faster as a result of that as well. So that's like, some rat studies, but I do think that, like you said, the athletes also report that they recover faster from the exercise. The heat that you add, let's say on top of after a resistance exercise, would help with like muscle growth as well, because of the growth hormone and the reduced catabolism. So it's not the same as you would with the cold, where like if you take the cold, you take a cold bath or something like cryo immediately after hitting the weights, then some research show that it inhibits the muscle growth signal and the adaptation, the anabolic signal, because of shutting down inflammation and shutting down the anabolism, whereas that doesn't happen with the heat. So the heat is kind of again like a small stressor. It mimics the aspects of exercise and increases some of the growth hormone. So yeah, I think if you really want to recover faster from exercise, then taking the sauna for maybe again like 20 minutes would be good, because although it may not inhibit the muscle adaptation, like overdoing it is still probably not a good idea. So you just want to get like a modest dose of the heat immediately after exercise, and that may be like a 20-minute session. In terms of like fasting and that sort of thing, I would still, like on some days, if I'm not working out on rest days, then I would take the sauna in a fasted state, because of like, again, it's going to reduce the potential muscle catabolism that you get from fasting by increasing the growth hormone and decreasing protein degradation. So that would be good, especially if we're doing like longer extended fasts. That would be like a perfect recipe for preventing muscle loss on a long fast. And on top of that, like the heat, although the heat, has all these benefits, the heat also releases certain like stress granules and other, inflammatory molecules to a certain extent, that if they stick around for too long, then it's not going to be good in general. So you would want to get like the stress response from the heat as well as other stressors like the colds and exercise, but you want to kind of clear out those stress molecules and stress granules as well quite rapidly so that they wouldn't stick around. And for that, they have been shown like the process of autophagy kind of deals with that, like eliminates these stress granules. So if you take the sauna in a fasted state, then you kind of hit two birds with one stone. You get the benefits of the sauna, and at the same time, because you're in a higher state of like autophagy, then it also means that you eliminate those inflammatory stress granules as well from the fasting. So like, it doesn't mean that you have to take the sauna fasted. It probably means that you don't want to go into the sauna with like a full stomach and immediate after eating something massive, because then you go into the sauna with less autophagy, and your kind of resilience against the heat would be somewhat lower as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think like from a metabolic perspective, that sounds like it makes sense. But even just from a comfort level, right? Like if you have a heavy meal, you go into a hot sauna, it's not very comfortable. Just from a subjective, like, hey, is this like a reasonable human feelings and emotion perspective?
For sure.
You mentioned stress granules, and I've never heard of that concept before. What is that exactly? Is that like, I mean, there's stress hormones, cortisol. Like, what is the definition of stress granules, and what does that mean from a physiology perspective?
Yeah, it's like hard to define those. There's specific like protein complexes, and I can give you like a few examples. They're quite complex names. Like YB1, like Y-box protein 1 is an example of that, and Lin28, and so these very complex names, but essentially stress granules. They appear in response to any kind of physiological stress to a certain extent, whether that be the cold or the heat. And they do. Are
these proteins? Are these proteins?
They're basically like complexes, and protein complexes, and they have been like implicated in some diseases if they're like in excess or if they stay around for too long. So it's a normal physiological response. Problem is that if you're like maybe in a disease state where your body isn't capable of dealing with them or eliminating them proactively, then things may go wrong.
Yeah, cool. That's helpful. I'm learning a new concept there. So one thing I think you said and I want to explore this more, is this use of hot and cold, heat and cold. And I think one of the things that you hit on top of was that when you do cold, you actually halt a lot of the anabolic processes. So, and I think when people look at LeBron James doing like the cryo chamber and all these like elite athletes doing the cryo chamber, I see a lot of wannabe athletes and a lot of gym enthusiasts just like want to do the cryo chamber. But exactly to your point, there's actually been a randomized controlled trial that if you constantly go cold after a heavy workout, you actually decrease the anabolic processes and you actually don't get the benefits of your exercise. And I think that's not well understood enough, because people are just like, oh, I want to kind of be my hero, like LeBron James. So I'm going to just like go to the cryo chamber every single day. And you're actually just like detracting from the benefit of exercise. However, I think LeBron James is not stupid. I think what he precisely is doing is that for certain scenarios, when you're not looking for adaptation, where you're just trying to get recovery to perform the next day because you're in a playoff series, you just want to be as fresh as possible, then it might make sense to go cryo, go cold, reduce your inflammation so you're fresh the next day. But don't do that for your training, right? Because you want adaptation, you want more stress, you want to get that damage. Your body can actually repair that damage, get stronger. So I think that's like the fine-tuned nuance in terms of cold. Don't use cold all the time after a workout. Only use cold if you are like having like a series of competitions, series of things where you need to perform. And like for the next day, it's like the playoff game or something important, then maybe use the cold. And I think conversely, the same thing applies for heat. Like heat, as you're mentioning, is another hormetic stress. So you're causing more damage, more stress and then as the body recovers that, you get more adaptation, you compound the benefits of exercise. But I would then conversely also be careful of using too much heat right before a playoff game. Because so I think that's like kind of the way I would recommend and talk about in terms of using heat and cold, right? Like don't necessarily sauna right before the match tomorrow, right? Because that's like an extra workout essentially before the actual match that counts. But definitely use the sauna during the workout training routine up till the competition, and then like basically try to peak, right? Like do everything easy, do everything light, don't necessarily do a sauna anymore. And then conversely, the cold should not be used in training, but then used during, battlefield or used during a competition time. Any thoughts there? Any clarifications there? Disagree? Agree?
Yeah, I agree. And it depends on the goals of the person and what are they training for. So like LeBron James doesn't want to be Ronnie Coleman, or he doesn't want to be as big and muscular as him. So for him, it makes sense to take like a cryo after like a training session or something, or in between games, because he needs to get like recovered quickly in order to be prepared for the next game. And he doesn't care about muscle growth at that point, or these adaptations that he may be pursuing. Whereas if you are like you're going to the gym on a regular basis, then you need to have like this small amount of inflammation and stress in order to signal the body to adapt and grow. So, the small amount of stress or the adaptations you get from the exercise are one of the kind of key signaling factors to the adaptations that you get in terms of like strength increase, power, and muscle growth. The literature doesn't really show that the cold inhibits like cardiovascular adaptations. So you may still take like a colder soak after cardio or something, or like endurance type of exercise, but it does definitely shut down like the anabolism from like resistance training and weights especially. So I would if I were to take the cold, then I would take it only on like rest days when I'm trying to get recovery, and I wouldn't take it on the days where I'm doing weights and muscle growth.
Yeah, I agree. In terms of overdoing it, maybe I just haven't like sit in the sauna for 5 hours. Obviously there's some limit where like you just start cooking yourself. Right. Do you have some subjective sense where you push it too far? I mean, like I've definitely heard of, again, friends who sat in 212 degree Fahrenheit, which is boiling, for like hours, and like kind of do it as like a feat of strength type of a competition. Right. Is there a range that's actually dangerous? I don't think this is like not studied in RCTs or clinic like research. This is just like top performers, elite performers, biohackers, just like pushing the limits of what's known. I'm curious, do you have anecdotes? thoughts in terms of when people go take it too far, or have you seen that limit where it feels like people have like basically passed the Yerkes-Dodson curve of actually being beneficial?
Yeah, for sure. Like, maybe it was, I think, 2012 or is maybe like 2008, something like a decade ago. There was like the sauna championships in Finland, and
people compete for how long they can stay in the sauna. That's a thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that they had been doing it quite for a while, but in their finalists, one was a Finnish guy, another was Russian, and they hit maybe like 240 Fahrenheit, something like that. And after maybe 10 minutes or so, they both started to pass out or something, and they had to be carried out. They had severe burns. The Russian guy went into convulsions, and and he eventually died. So to kind of after, so the Finnish guy got alive, but after that the event was completely cancelled, and they didn't get to organize it again. So you can definitely overdo the heat, and if you stay in there for too long, if you're trying to compete with something or someone else, then it can definitely be quite damaging. And if not, skin burns, then you can definitely pass out or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's an oven, right? Literally, think of your pizza oven, right? 240 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm glad that's canceled. Actually, it makes no sense. It's straight up dumb. It's not a competition, right? It's clearly a stressor. And if you're telling people, hey, how long can we boil? That's torture competition, right?
For sure.
I think it's pretty sensible. That's not a sanction event. I'm not telling people what's good or not good. I'm not trying to regulate what you do on your own time, but to promote essentially torture, right? It's how many nails can you pound into your hand, right? It's almost at that level, right? It's how long can you stay in an oven for? Jeez.
Yeah, I think
it's
in
really
terms
sad.
of
Damn, that's really sad. That I'm sure these really fit people, clearly, right? They killed themselves essentially. Damn.
Yeah. I think in terms of the temperatures, then you don't need to reach that high to get the optimal dose. So you probably get the optimal heat shock protein response even within 170, 180, something like that. So you don't really need to go beyond that. And the increase above that threshold would just make you more tolerant of the heat. So let's say you just become tougher against it. And I don't think it has additional health benefits. It just gives this pure resilience against the heat, which, can be a good thing to have, but it's not necessarily healthier, and it's not definitely needed. So unless you maybe have a particular line of work that you may get exposed to that high amount of heat, it doesn't have a specific benefit beyond just the heat tolerance.
Yeah, and I think it's also one of these hard areas of science where it's hard to understand the dose response, right? It's I guess we could come up with a protocol right now, right? Just do 30 minutes at 150, 160, 170, 180, 190, 200, 210, 220, and then see which growth hormone levels, which testosterone levels, which heat shock protein levels are optimal. That would be an interesting study if there's a grad student out there that wants to have a free research idea, thesis idea. That could be interesting to learn. But as far as I know, there's no dose response study for sauna.
There are some for the growth hormone. So if they do 100 degrees Celsius, which is 210,
212.
Like
it's 212. That's boiling. Yeah.
Yeah, 212 for 15 minutes, then that increases growth hormone by 5-fold. If they do it for an hour, then that's 16-fold increase in growth hormone. So there is some studies there, but it's not very conclusive.
Okay,
and
so it's dose response on length, not on length. I mean, the holy grail would be length of sauna by temperature of sauna. And you have this whole table. That would be cool to understand that data. Right. Because then it's then you would know, hey, it's 2 hours at 170 equivalent to 1 hour at 190. That would just be interesting from a nerd out perspective to understand how everything translates.
Yeah. And then you can go maybe 5 minutes in 260 and get it over with or something.
Yeah. Or hopefully you don't die. Yeah. One thing maybe to just help elucidate is that there's also a difference between steam rooms and dry sauna. For sure, there's steam rooms where there's actual steam coming out, and that's much harder to stay for long periods of time versus a dry sauna. Having experience with both, right? Dry sauna, just very dry heat. But when you're breathing steam, you can't stay in hot steam because that's going to like singe your lungs. You're going to be cooking your internals if you're like sitting in boiling steam, breathing in boiling steam. So definitely, I think for folks who are contemplating, thinking about different types of heat interventions, understand there's a difference between steam rooms versus dry sauna, and then potentially looking at infrared as like a third little lever there.
Inhaling the heat can also, help to reduce, especially like sinus infections or maybe symptoms of colds, because you do inhale the heat, and the heat can kill off some pathogens, and also maybe create a more like a specific or localized heat shock protein response. So inhaling some warm air at least can be beneficial, but I agree that it's much difficult, and you can't do it that much.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think it's just like if you're like, you don't want to be like sniffing up like boiling steam necessarily, right? Sure. Like that's gonna hurt. Let's talk a little bit more about cold. I think I'm curious. Like obviously, I think I'm more of an explorer of heat, but Wim Hof, a lot of these like breathing practices focus on the cold. Tell me about your experience there. Have you tried to do like long durations in cold, full submersion, breathing patterns, whether that's Wim Hof or otherwise? That might be a fun topic to explore.
Yeah, well, I do take the cold as well, maybe a few times a week. The biggest benefit that I see is mostly like reduced inflammation, and kind of shuts down like muscle soreness. So it is a great tool for recovery and not being sore. So I primarily would use it on like rest days when I'm not working out. But yeah, like the cold has been shown to also like strengthen the immune system a little bit by increasing white blood cells and increasing also glutathione levels. So it can be a good strategy for increasing your immune system strength preventatively, so to say. Because I think if you're like already sick or you have like symptoms of sickness, then going into cold may actually make things worse because you put like additional stressor on the body.
Yeah.
Whereas if you do it like proactively as you're already healthy, that can just increase your resilience overall. But generally, yeah, it's. I think the cold is less promising as the heat. So the heat is probably healthier, and the heat has more evidence as well. And the heat has like maybe fewer side effects. But like I personally enjoy the cold as well, because the euphoria you get from it while doing it is also quite astonishing. So the energy and the increased focus and those things are also quite awesome.
Yeah, I've experimented with the cold showers and then hot cold plunges. Yeah, I mean, it's like needles everywhere. You just really wake up for sure. I've had some very good friends experiment with Wim Hof breathing methods. I haven't personally done a lot of breath work myself. Is that something that you focus on or practice while you're doing the cold, or is it just like cold plunge? You don't worry too much about breath work?
Well, I have tried like the Wim Hof method a little bit, but like it depends on which one, which one particularly. So he has like the hyperventilation where he breathes very rapidly. That's the one that you shouldn't really do like right before going into the colds. At least that's what he says, because it kind of ramps, psychs you up too much, and makes it more like likely for that you may have like some faint or something like that when you are in the cold. So the hyperventilation is supposed to be done like in the mornings or something, where you try to oxygenize your body and just practice some aspects of breath control and breath holds. Whereas if I'm actually in the cold, then what I think is the most important thing to do is to just try to stay as calm as possible, because most people, they're gonna tense up really a lot when they're in the cold. They get the shock and they start to again like hyperventilate a little bit, but that's not what you're supposed to do, or you shouldn't do it. You should try to control your breath as much as possible, because if you lose control of your breath, then it's much easier for you to lose control of the stress response as well, and you go into this chronic, or like you overactivate the sympathetic nervous system, and you kind of panic almost. Whereas if you stay calm, you focus on your breath and try to slow it down, then that's where you kind of calm down the body as well. Your body kind of goes into more parasympathetic state, and at that point, actually, like usually people go into the cold, they hyperventilate a few seconds maybe, and they start to calm down, and maybe after 30 seconds or so, they're like almost completely quiet and calm, and they're just sitting there and they're focusing on the breath, and they're like really still. And it's a quite phenomenal response that you overcame this initial reaction. And once you do that, then it actually becomes very enjoyable, and the people just stay silent.
Yeah, it's actually pretty interesting. And I remember just as a kid growing up in Los Angeles and having a lot of swimming pools around, and sometimes like you're a kid, like your parents don't want you to drown. It's like, yeah. And I remember just thinking like, if you freak out and you get in the water, you like muscle cramp, and then you can actually like drown, right? So I think it is actually something that I hear a lot from folks who spend a lot of time in the water. You got to just stay calm in the water, right? Like you're not fighting your way out of the ocean. You're not going to fight your way through this like mass of gallons of water. But if you're calm, you're loose, you like accept and like move with the water, you can actually preserve your oxygen, preserve your cognition, and actually make it out alive, which is good to have. I guess it's like if we ever find ourselves just dunked into like a Titanic situation where you just get thrown into the frigid ocean, stay calm is the takeaway. Cool. Anything else? So we talked about vitamin D, sunlight. We were talking about heat and cold, sauna, cold plunges. What else in terms of kind of lifestyle, interventional things that could be takeaways for folks to explore?
Well, in terms of like the stress and stress adaptation, then I think it's also very important to have like psychological resilience. So that kind of just refers to emotionally and mentally not being overtaken by stress and like stressful events. So, what I find the most valuable thing for that is to kind of realize that, these stressful things, uncontrollable things, chaos, pandemics, war, whatever it may be, they're kind of almost guaranteed to happen eventually. Like it's not a matter of if, it's more like a matter of when. And once we kind of realize that, we can also make peace with that to a certain extent, that we don't have to freak out about those things because we can't control them. Like we can't control the weather and we can't control outside events. We can only control our own response and our own thoughts and actions. So just focusing on that can we can find more peace in that. And therefore we can also, if we focus only on the things that we can control, such as our thoughts and actions, then we can also control our response to the stress when it does arrive. So instead of panicking, instead of freaking out, we almost, automatically, okay, this is what it is. I'm not going to try to control the things that I can't control. I'm going to focus on the things that I can control. And not only are you more prepared for that, but you will also maintain like a more rational way of behaving when the actual event happens.
Yeah, interesting. This is something I've actually put a lot of thought into recently as well. So I'm curious, where did kind of this mindset philosophy come from? Like I've personally landed towards this mind of thinking, and I think a lot of it's been inspired both from Western philosophy, Stoicism, right? Marcus Aurelius, reading his journal, his writing about surviving the barbarian hordes as he's like at the tail end of the peak of the Roman Empire. And I also see a lot of the similar philosophical thinking from Zen Buddhism, right? Just having some detachment and being centered and kind of going with the flow. So I think tying both of these traditions, Western Stoicism, Eastern Zen Buddhism, and I think especially now with a lot of things out of our control with pandemic and political and social unrest and all of that stuff, this is something that I personally think about a lot. So one, I just want to establish that. But two, it's like, I feel like sometimes it feels maybe callous. It feels like maybe we like are uncaring of like the pain of our fellow humans, and that we're like, hey, you got to relax.
Right.
And I don't know if that's because we're overly sensitive and we're performing for political correctness, that we need to like say these nice words about like something we didn't cause, something we weren't a part of, something we cannot control. But like we need to say some lip service to like, oh, we feel sorrow, or we need to have prayers and all that stuff, which is not to say we shouldn't have prayers. Just like, to me, it's like, is being stoic, is being Zen, is being detached, overly callous? How are you reconciling that? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, first of all, maybe like the Stoicism has this connotation of being like very cold and very emotionless, but I think that's not necessarily the case, or it doesn't have to be that. So you can definitely like be compassionate about your fellow human beings and close ones, and you don't necessarily have to like lose your stoic grip on things by that. So you can still be rational, and you can still be logical. You can still try to do the best you can, or you can still try to focus on the things that you can control. So it doesn't have to neglect the aspect of stoicism. So, and it doesn't also make you that you kind of give up or you stop fighting. Like actually, one of the most stoic things would be to fight against whatever these external forces, whatever it may be, even though it may be futile or something like that, just because it's the right thing to do. Like in Stoicism, the highest value is virtue, which is virtue. You could call it some doing the right thing, or having integrity and acting in a right way, in a good way. That can be going into some sort of like stoic being. Growing children is one of the most stoic things to do. Like as a parent, you have to sacrifice your health and your time and your resources and all those things in order to do the right thing, which is to be a parent and make sure that you grow up your child in the best way you can. And likewise, like Marcus Aurelius, he was also stoic in a way that he put himself into this situation where he was, surrounded by barbarians. Like during his time, he was actually Rome was also going through the pandemic of its own that killed almost 1/3 of the population. And, during the time he was, experiencing a lot of, suffering and chaos and those things, but he still kind of tried to maintain this virtuous character that he always wanted to do the right thing and be compassionate towards other people around him, but at the same time also be very kind of rational about it and never let his anger and emotions take control of his actions.
I think well stated there. And I think part of the reason why I like to read history and really just learn the lessons from the past is that imagine if 1/3 of our friends died through a pandemic, right? Which is basically what you're describing happened in Rome during Marcus Aurelius's hour, plus having foreign invaders around surrounding you and your legions are falling. What kind of stress, what kind of anxiety must that human be carrying on his shoulder? And then I think about my very, very soft problems, and I'm like, hey, this is not that bad. Mm-hmm. And so I think again, so I don't want to be callous to our current suffering, right? Because I think for someone who's lost a loved one or is struggling through a challenging economy, that level of pain is max pain to them, right? Because they don't know, I don't know what it's like to be a Roman emperor. Neither do you, neither does, our hypothetical third person that is struggling right now. They're hitting their max pain, which is the same subjective feeling as Marcus Aurelius losing 1/3 of his civilization, his population, and being invaded. So that's an interesting, I think, thought point to just meditate on.
Yeah, the suffering is always subjective. So if we were to be put into the shoes of someone else, then we would experience also that max pain and max suffering. But we shouldn't discard that. But once again, we then have to realize again this very subjective to us, and there have been many people in the past who have experienced multifold, much higher amounts of suffering as well. If you were to try to, objectively try to quantify it in some ways, which isn't a good idea. But again, this kind of we have to kind of realize again, that these things happen and they're kind of inevitable, and we shouldn't we shouldn't try to think of them as something that are avoidable to a certain extent. And one Buddhist quote, I think that can be also helpful for that is that pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. So we will always experience the pain. We will always experience the heat shock or the exercise or the physical trauma, something hitting us or something we get hit by a bus. The pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So we will always choose the suffering based upon our subjective perspective of it, so to say, so that we kind of rationalize it in our head to kind of categorize it as suffering. Whereas if we were to categorize it or view it from a different perspective, then it might not be as suffering for us. So of course, losing loved ones, it is suffering, and it is hard. But again, you can use that same mindset for some easier situations, missing the bus or being injured in some way.
Yeah, and I think just this notion of subjective max suffering. I think part of it also allows, I become more empathetic with that realization, because maybe for that person who's a snowflake and like hasn't had real suffering in their life, maybe they literally are like having their world melted because they haven't had any hard actual suffering and challenges, and something little like really ruined their day. Like there's some empathy there for, in their very subjective frame, that's like the worst thing's ever happened, that they missed the bus.
Yeah.
And then so I think it's like that balance, right? It's like that I have that empathy of understanding in their mindset. It's like, wow, they had the worst day in their life because like their makeup was ruined, or, you know, someone like scowled at them on the bus. Yeah. But then I think the deeper realization is that, you know, have some empathy to our fellow person. But I think when I'm looking at like the beauty and privilege of my life compared to, you know, previous generations who actually had to go through famine, war, people trying to murder you, people trying to kill you. It's like, dude, my life is I have no freaking problems, right? It's just like, I think that's been really empowering for me to just like approach the world with gratitude. Right? Like no one's trying to kill me. Like no one's trying to like stab me outside, you know, crossing fingers. And I think it's like, man, I think probably for a lot of human history, a lot of people actually had to be worried about getting killed by like a tiger or like another fellow human. And it's like, man, in that super macro lens, we're pretty damn lucky. So I think it's like, how do you hold all of these like realizations and how do you become productive in like that Zen or Stoic mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the way you kind of bridge this gap is to when the person is like actually in the particular moment experiencing the suffering, or they're in this event, something bad happened to them. Then in that situation, you should be empathetic, and you should be compassionate, and you should consolidate or help them at that moment in time, because then they're very irresponsible, or they're not responsive to like your rational thinking. They're not going to want to hear it. They don't care about all these things that in the past humans were suffering much more than you did, because again, like they're in this max pain state and they don't want to hear anything about it. And that's why you have to be very passionate and compassionate in that moment. But afterwards, once the event has passed, then the goal should be to try to shift their mindset a little bit. Again, teach them these principles that we talked about, that you can't control many things. And again, like you are actually very fortunate, and all of us are very fortunate, and you shouldn't take things for granted. And you should kind of try to get them out of this snowflake state. But if they're already a snowflake and they are experiencing this trauma and stress, then in that state, you should also be somewhat of a snowflake, or at least try to mimic their physiology in some way in order to allow them to get out of it intact.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I was born like with this realization, right? Like I definitely was a snowflake at different periods of my life. And I don't think you or I are even claiming we're like super Jedi masters or anything, but like maybe just humanize it for people. Were there some moments that like allowed you to, or put you down the path of reading Marcus Aurelius, being self-reflective? Were there points of maybe to give you a sense of where I think I came from, was that like there were definitely low points in business or career or personal life where I felt like the world was ending. And then I think those depths of pain, of fear, of sense of failure were like that foil. And it caused me to like just really self-reflect and understand my psychology better and better and better. I think as I saw the depths of what it's like to feel like crap, I could then have like the full understanding of what it's like to feel grateful and feel a place from fortunate and gratitude. And I feel like I've seen this when I talk to people that have sensed or experienced like real loss. Like I talk to a lot of military veterans who've lost their brothers in battle. And I think some people like don't react to that well, have PTSD and like have like just actual mental issues. But I feel like some folks who really internalize that in terms of in growing from the experience, where it's like life is so precious that like I get to live now. Like my brother died, protecting alongside me, and now like I have a chance to live this short life. I feel like those people were really enjoy the beauty of life. So I think to me, there's probably like that foil that one must see pain, one must see like the depth of like how low our emotions can go to really get a full understanding of the spectrum. And I think too many of us today in this modern, very soft, cushy modernity are always in just like euphoria and like no one liked your social media posts enough. So then you're like really depressed. And that's like the range of your emotion. I'm curious to not, pass the mic back to you in terms of what your thoughts are. Do you have personal like down points? Was that a trigger for you? What was your personal journey on the mindset side?
I've always been like very self-reflective and deep into self-inquiry, but maybe like I realized like this stoic viewpoint of the world that you can't control many things and you should only focus on your own actions and thoughts is when I was in the military. So there, like, you are, training a lot, you're in the cold, in the snow, in the rain all the time. And at that time, also like in your deep thoughts most of the time. So I was thinking, we are very fortunate of just having a roof over our head, because like it can be taken away at a moment's notice, and no one cares. Like the nature and the universe don't care about these human rights or the comforts of society. Those actually, they're like man-made things actually. So in the real world, like those things actually don't exist. So that's why I've been, if you could call it like a small shock, because I went to the military also right after high school, like I was 18, and as a young man it can have like a pretty profound impact. But after the military, I was also just I was like very motivated after the military to take like personal development very seriously. Like I read all the books, I did a lot of like I worked on myself a lot, and that was when I stumbled upon many of the philosophers and just general this mindset that you can, like, the same situation can happen to different people, and they can respond completely differently, and the trajectory of their life is also going to be completely different. Like you can take even like twins, and they may respond to these events in a different way. Like someone may become like a drug addict, or someone else will become like a successful businessman or something else. What determines is only like their own response to the situation and the event that is going to determine the trajectory. So I think that's one of the biggest, or the most important things of trying to control your response to those events, and making sure that you try to do the best decision as well as you can, based upon like the knowledge and the resources you have in that moment.
Yeah, I think two things I want to reflect on, which is one, I think the challenge of enlisting into the military as an 18-year-old kid is, I think within just human ancestral culture, there's always these rites of passage for young men, young women across a lot of cultures. And I think for better or for worse, we do not have that anymore. Like, is that college? But college is like 4 years of partying for most kids, especially in America, where it's like very expensive. They take student debt, and like they're not seriously studying, right? Just look at what college kids are doing actually, right? Sure, there's some kids are serious about academics and doing, but is that really valuable for 50% of college students where they're just there to booze and party and meet boys and girls? It's fine for a vacation, right? But is that really a rite of passage, a challenge?
Right.
And I think there's something missing about our culture, our society, where it's too soft. There's no rite of passage where people see that struggle. And then two, reflecting on like being in the wilderness. And I've had some very, very lightweight experience there, just pushing myself and spending time with like-minded folks in terms of personal resiliency, personal survival. And I think what you said in terms of like human rights are like not real, like that might not be PC, right? But it's not actually real in the sense that like there's no laws of physics that says like, hey, like humans are, whatever, like you have the right to healthcare. I don't know. There's no like law of physics that like you have the right to healthcare.
Yeah.
And I think just spending a lot of time in nature, and, went on a super beautiful safari in South Africa and seeing like the wildebeest migration. Nature is like, I think there's like a really cool Instagram and Twitter handle. Nature is metal. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's just like, you just see like animals like in nature, like being friggin' metal, meaning like you see like antelopes with like legs torn off and gorillas like eating baby, antelopes, and you see the rawness of nature. Like nature is not very pretty. Civilization has tried to like mollify and edge the corners of like how brutal reality is. And I think when you're camping outside in the cold and you have like a little space blanket and you're just like freezing your butt off, dude, there's like no, like nature is not offering you like free food, water, and fire and shelter. Like you're out there, there's like no laws of humanity. It's just the laws of physics, and like they don't care.
Yeah, exactly. And what one thing that is unfortunate about our modern society is that we don't have, again, like some necessity to like take responsibility for our actions, and also like be more independent. We don't have like necessity because we expect everything to be handed to us, and that can be okay if we were to live in this utopian society, but we don't. So we're like one solar flare away from some complete collapse of society, or to a certain extent at least for a while. And unexpected things can happen, and we just
and we kind of like take our and we kind of saw that with the early phases of the pandemic, where people in America were just stocking up on toilet paper, right? Sure. But like I do want to say that does not mean that we're like cold, that we don't have compassion. Sure. I think my point, at least, and it sounds like we're on the same page here, is that like just understanding that society is so brittle that we're not that far away from just like going back to nature, and therefore like having some real appreciation with experiencing that the coldness of nature, the coldness of physics, makes me appreciate civilization, culture, compassion, community, having a tribe, like having good conversation. It makes me actually appreciate that so much more, and why society, rule of law is so important. And again, I think it's because people don't know how bad it actually could be. They're like, like they take it for granted. And then I think people just like want to like tear things down over like a snowflake issue. So after being like in the military and in the wilderness and so on, I am more appreciative of the thing that we have built is quite marvelous. Democratic society and human freedoms and human rights, they're amazing things, and that's why I'll like fight more for those things in order to not lose them, and again like value them, and not let these things be taken for granted. And after a while, like once you do try to, let's say, impose more responsibility on yourself and try to take care of yourself more independently, then you actually start to enjoy life more as well, because you have like more confidence, and you you have a more like a sense of agency in the world, that you can control things at least a little bit more compared to something that if you were to be completely dependent of someone helping you or some others external world supporting you, like you're outsourcing your agency, if that makes sense. Whereas if you were to be more independent, then you will at least be assured that you are doing the best at doing the things that you can control, which is yourself essentially. Yep. And I think the added social benefit from that is that the more valuable and independent you are, and the more you can contribute, the better you can actually help the overall community and society, right? Because if you can't help yourself, how can you actually help your community? So I think that's where, a lot of where I think about is like, how do you optimize yourself? And then from there, how do you optimize the group around you, your team, your community, and overall civilization? I think those are just like very related problems. If you can improve yourself, you can actually have a shot at improving your community, your neighborhood around you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you want to change the world, then start with yourself. Like many quotes have said.
I mean, I don't think there's a much better place to wrap up. I mean, it's been a fun conversation going from health, vitamin D to it was fun to just chat philosophy and mindset and resilience. I think now more than ever, we need more people to be mentally resilient and confident and productive as possible, and let's not devolve into panic and fear and the negativity of all of that. So we'll leave it at that. So as we wrap up here, where do people follow along? What projects are you looking forward to? What are the shout outs?
Yeah, well, my website is siimland.com, and I'm also Siim Land on all the social media platforms. Currently, I have released the Stronger by Stress book, which talks about these same topics, hormesis and stress resilience. But I'm also working on a documentary type of movie about the same topic, Stronger by Stress, which will maybe next year come out somewhere. But yeah, we'll see.
Cool. Yeah. When that comes out, we'll have you back on to talk about it. So Siim, again, always a pleasure to chat. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.